We now know the non-conference schedule for Indiana basketball coming up for the 2024 season, but is it too easy?
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Hoosiers. I am your host, Jacob Goins. Thank you so much for being here and making this your first listen each and every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sport stops sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every single day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Hoosiers truly your first listen each and every day. You're my everydayer. I know you are, and I appreciate you so much, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on audio. And a reminder that we are always free and available wherever you get your podcast. Well, we've had the non-conference schedule for a couple of days. It was fully released by Indiana. Most college programs released their non-conference schedule in terms of basketball in the last few days. And as I've been looking through this Indiana schedule and kind of doing some research and breaking things down, I got a little concerned. I'm a little concerned. I'm not going to lie to you, because I just don't know how challenging it's going to be in the non-conference schedule from November through December before you get into Big Ten play at the start of the new year. And I just don't get overly excited when I look at this non-conference schedule. And I know it's not your conference schedule. It's not all your Big Ten opponents, right? You're not supposed to make it so overly hard that you're under 500 before you start conference play. I get that. I 100% get that. But you do want to make it challenging. You do want to make it to where your team understands, okay, we have to show up every night and play our best basketball, even in November and December. And there will be games where we have to do that this season, no doubt about it. But there's also going to be some games where I just don't get overly pumped up about. I'm going to be really honest with you. So we're going to look at the non-conference schedule today, tell you why maybe it's a little too easy, how that could maybe hurt us, but how we could take advantage of that as well. Talk about the battle for Atlantis, dive into this schedule a little bit more as well. The non-conference schedule has been released, and you start looking at it, okay? Here's the full schedule for Indiana. Starting Indiana basketball, of course. Starting on November 1st, you'll have an exhibition game against Marion, and then you'll open up the season. Indiana Hoosier basketball starts on November 6th, right here in Bloomington at Assembly Hall. We'll be playing SIU Edwardsville on November 6th, okay? And so have that game to open up. Fine. That's okay. That's whatever. It's an easy game. Get going. Get a game under your belt. Let's roll. All right. November 10th, Eastern Illinois here at home. November 16th, South Carolina from the SEC. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. UNC Greensboro on November 21st. So those are your first four games. SIU Edwardsville, Eastern Illinois, South Carolina, and UNC Greensboro. Then you take a trip after a week off down to the battle for Atlantis, where you're going to play a combination of Arizona, Davidson, Louisville, Providence, West Virginia, and Gonzaga. Indiana will be a part of that as well. You'll play 3 games in the battle for Atlantis. You come home on December 3rd and play Sam Houston State. Then you host Miami of Ohio, UT Chattanooga, and Winthrop on December 28th. So that's your full non-conference schedule, okay? And it just seems very manageable. Easy, manageable, winnable, if you will. Whatever kind of words you want to throw in there. And that concerns me a little bit, because on the good side of things, right, remember a year ago how we were struggling to beat the Morehead States of the world, and we were stressing each and every time in non-conference play on whether we were actually going to win the game or not. Well, I don't think that's going to be an issue this season. I don't think that's a problem. I think this team's going to have a much better success rate against mid-major teams and not have to go to overtime and win by one and hit a last-second free throw or tip-in to win a basketball game against North Alabama, okay? I don't think that's going to be a problem this season. But you look through here and, man, I just don't know how much better we're going to be able to get against, Sam Houston State. And I know that they won, right? They won their conference a year ago. And you start looking through at Miami of Ohio and UT Chattanooga and Winthrop. Like, look, I get it. I do. I totally understand why you put some of these teams in here, but I just wanted it to be a little bit more beefier. Okay. I just wanted it to be a little bit more challenging. Now, South Carolina out of the SEC, that's awesome. That's fantastic. That's a South Carolina team that was 26-8 last year. Okay, that's a team that's really, really good, brought in some good transfers, and is on the up and coming in the Southeastern Conference. I like that game. I love that game. Heck, there's a part of me that wishes we were going to South Carolina just to see what we're made of before the conference play begins. But it is what it is. That's fine. That's going to be a good game, and I'm excited for that one on November 16th. Then you do have the battle for Atlantis, and I'll dive deeper into that a little bit later in the next segment, but that's an exciting tournament too. There's a lot of big names, there's some good players, big name coaches, and it's on national television. So that's a good opportunity as well. I'm just concerned that once we get to conference play where the Big Ten's going to be stacked, man, there's going to be a lot of good teams this season. And look, you just added 4 more to the conference. I just hope we're ready. I hope we're battle tested, and I hope that this team is prepared when Big Ten play starts, because it's going to start with a bang. You're going to have tons of tough teams to play night in and night out. We don't know the conference schedule just yet. We don't know how that's all lined up just yet, but you are going to hit it hard and hit the ground running. And so the good news is I think this is a very winnable schedule. I think the Hoosiers have a chance to possibly go undefeated in this non-conference schedule. Bad news is, how tested will we be? How much will we be able to work on our game and work on ourselves? And how many of these games are we going to be really having to grind and come together as a team and grow as a team if you're beating the UNC Greensboros by 30 points? I don't know. I don't know. And maybe we won't. Maybe it'll be like last year where you've got to beat every team by 1 point and take them to overtime and sweat and be concerned on a Tuesday night in November and get on here and be mad at us and be mad fans when the Hoosiers aren't doing what we want them to do. Maybe that'll be the case. I hope not, but maybe so. I don't know. I just have a little concern that the schedule's a little too easy in the non-conference, but you don't want it to be overly hard to, like I said earlier, to where you are losing games and you just are plummeting in the rankings and things like that. So we shall see. But the exciting news is we've got a date. November 6th. That is the first game of the year. You do have that exhibition against Marion. And cool thing about that, new head coach there at Marion, Pat Knight, is the son of the late, great Bob Knight, right, of Indiana, which is really, really cool. And so excited for him to be a head coach there. Excited for Indiana to be bringing him and his new squad in. It is an exhibition, okay? That's on November 1st. So that's a really, really cool moment. And I think that's going to be really special for him to return to Indiana with his new program and return to Assembly Hall, a place that his dad was, of course, a legend. Well, coming up on Locked On Hoosiers, I want to dive into that battle for Atlantis a little bit more, because while the rest of the non-conference schedule doesn't overly excite me, the battle for Atlantis does. We'll dive into that field and what it means for Indiana if they go down there and how about win the thing. We'll talk about that coming up next on Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sportsbook betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back into Locked On Hoosiers. Appreciate you being here again, making this part of your rotation, your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on YouTube, audio platforms. Doesn't matter how you take it in. I just appreciate you being here. If you are on YouTube watching me right now, be sure you like the video, comment down below your thoughts on the non-conference schedule for Indiana basketball. Plus, hit on our little Locked On Hoosiers logo and subscribe to our channel. That way, you know every time that we post a new episode, which I'll let you in on a secret. It's every single day. Also on audio, do the same thing. Follow us, notifications, whatever you got to do on Spotify, Apple, Google, doesn't matter. Be sure you never miss a new episode of Locked On Hoosiers, okay? Well, inside of this non-conference schedule, the Hoosiers are going to be a part of something special this season, and they'll be in the battle for Atlantis. It takes place November 27th, 28th, and 29th of this upcoming year. And the Hoosiers are a part of a field that I think is impressive, okay? I think it may be overblown just a little bit, but I do think it's a good tournament that takes place every year. I always watch it, right? It's part of the, battle for Atlantis. You've got the Maui Invitational. You've got that new one out in Vegas that's got NIL ties to it, which is really intriguing to me. I love Feast Week for college basketball. All those tournaments that are going on right around Thanksgiving that ESPN does a really good job with. I love Feast Week. It's one of my favorites of the entire season. And the Hoosiers get to be a really special part of it this year. Here's your battle for Atlantis tournament field this season. West Virginia, Providence, Oklahoma, Louisville, of course, Indiana, Gonzaga, Davidson, and Arizona. So just off the rip, there's some big names, right? Some big logos right there. West Virginia, Louisville, Gonzaga, Arizona, Indiana. Like there's some big name programs there. And even Oklahoma, newcomer to the SEC, Davidson, who has a historical basketball program. There's a lot going on. But then you start to break it down a little bit. It's like, okay, Louisville's been a joke for the last decade. West Virginia has gone through their coaching worries and troubles the last few seasons. Oklahoma, in terms of basketball, I think they can get there, but I don't think they're quite there just yet. Where does Arizona fall now that they've lost some players and one that we're all very familiar with? Gonzaga is always going to be good, but what do they look like this season? We'll take a deeper dive into them as we get closer. And then, you've got Davidson, and Providence is a team that I respect a ton from the Big East. And so it's going to be up and down. And here's the reality of this too. You're not going to play all those teams. It's a 3-game tournament that you'll be a part of. You get 3 games regardless. You can lose all 3. You could go 0 for 3, 1 for 2, 2-1, 3-0, whatever you want to do, right? It's a tournament, but you get those other 5th place games and bounce back games and things like that. So you are guaranteed 3 games at the battle for Atlantis. And look, playing 3 games, you're more than likely going to play one of Arizona or Gonzaga. You're probably going to play one of Louisville or Providence. And then, you'll probably play one of the bottom 3 of Oklahoma, West Virginia, and Davidson. That's fine. It is what it is. And excited to see what this all ends up looking like. And I think it's a good tournament. This will be the one time that this team, Indiana in particular, will really be tested in just a 3-day span. It takes you back to the AAU days where these guys are traveling as a team, you're staying at the hotel, and you're playing back-to-back-to-back games on back-to-back-to-back days, right? You get to play 3 teams that you'll never see again throughout the regular season, maybe match up with them in the NCAA tournament if the odds are lined up that way. But that's what's cool about these tournaments, man, is you get to get out of Bloomington, Indiana, which we love it here. Don't get me wrong. We love it here, but you get to go take a nice trip, and it's a full-on trip. You get to explore. You're on a little bit of a vacation, but you get to play some important games too, and the whole country's watching because, as I mentioned, ESPN puts on an entire Feast Week presentation, and all of these games in the battle for Atlantis will be nationally televised. So this is an opportunity for the Hoosiers and head coach Mike Woodson to kind of display themselves a little bit and remind people who we are. And in terms of the schedule as a whole being a little too easy for my taste and for my liking, this is a side piece to that because this will be a good test. It will. I'm excited about the battle for Atlantis. Because, man, think about if you go down and win it or you go 2-1. That's all you need. That's what you're looking for if you're the Hoosiers. You could even go 1-2 if you do it the right way, as long as you get better and learn about yourself along the way. Now, if you go down there and go 0-3, yeah, then we got some issues. But you use this to get better. You use a tournament like this to work on things, figure out where you are, because this will be, 3 weeks into the season, give or take. You'll have an idea if you're Mike Woodson and this coaching staff. All right, here's where we are. We got this that we're good at, this we need to work on, right? You can use that to go against these teams. And what's cool about it too is all of these teams are going to be different. They'll all be different. They all have different type of players and different sets offensively and defensively, and different coaching styles, different play styles, right? Different mindsets, different physicalities. And you can go in and just kind of learn a little bit. And you don't have to win it. You don't have to. I think Indiana can, and we'll have an episode on that early next week, but you don't have to. This is what I want in a non-conference schedule. I want to play the big name teams because ultimately that's what makes you better. It's nothing against the UT Chattanoogas and the Miami of Ohio's of the world, because you got to have some of those games, because let's be honest, you got to have some wins on the schedule. You got to have some wins on your resume. But I want to play teams that are going to make us better for Big Ten play, for February, and most importantly for March, because these games will do that. And if you can add some resume wins, resume building wins along the way, then, or at the same time, then you're in great shape. Right? You go in, let's say you play Arizona in the semifinals of the Battle for Atlantis, and you win that game. All right, you probably win it by a possession or two. You got to grind it out. You've learned a ton about yourself, and you've just added a resume building win that the tournament committee is going to look at come mid-March next year, when they're looking to see, all right, where are we going to put Indiana seed-wise? Oh, remember that big win they had over Arizona in the Battle for Atlantis? Yeah, let's bump them up a seed line because of that. That's what you have the opportunity to do in the Battle for Atlantis. And so I think it fits well in our non-conference schedule. The other games outside of South Carolina, they're okay. They are intriguing, and we are going to talk about those coming up next. But the Battle for Atlantis is the one to keep your eye on. If the Hoosiers go down and impress, if they play well, this is the time for all the new guys to really gel, figure things out, learn each other a lot more on and off the floor. You have a chance to be a really good team and grow from this and become much, much better out of the Battle for Atlantis, where I think take that out and you just throw two other random games in there in the non-con, then I'd be really, really concerned. But the fact that you have this, maybe that's why the Hoosiers didn't go out and schedule anything crazy outside of it. I don't know. Maybe that's why. And if that's the case, I get it. I do. I'd like to see some more of those South Carolinas in there, but it is what it is. This will be the time to prove and to learn what Indiana basketball can be this season. Coming up in our final segment on Locked on Hoosiers, we'll break down the rest of the non-conference schedule, talk about some records, interesting notes, things like that, and kind of wrap up this conversation where, again, I think it's a little too easy, but there is some good news on top of that, and we'll talk about that coming up next on Locked on Hoosiers. Final segment here on the show. Again, appreciate you being here, making this your first listen each and every day. I appreciate all my everydayers, those of you that show up each and every day, Monday through Friday. As we're approaching getting out of the off-season scheduling with 3 or 4 days a week, we're getting back into 4 and 5 days a week. So thank you so much, and keep that in mind as we get closer and closer to football season and, of course, basketball season on November 6th. Well, we talked about the Battle for Atlantis, and we're talking about the non-conference schedule that I have deemed a little too easy for my liking. And again, you look up and down this thing, and there's some really interesting notes on some of these teams. You've got former Indiana players that are coaching at these schools, and even some former players playing at these schools. And look, you have conference champions. Sam Houston State, they won Conference USA last year, the regular season. You have a South Carolina team that won 26 or 28 games last year. 26-8 last year is what South Carolina went. And a Sam Houston State that won 21, and Chattanooga that won 21, and UNC Greensboro that won 21. Like, you do have some teams that got some wins last year. I just don't know how much of a test they're going to be for Indiana, especially since you're not walking outside of Assembly Hall. I don't understand that aspect of it a little bit, because think about a year ago where Indiana, right, we went and played Auburn in Atlanta, which was basically a road game. I was there. It was basically a road game. Now, Indiana fans showed up. There ain't no doubt about it. You guys did your job, but there were a ton of Auburn fans. They were, 2 hours from Atlanta? And here's what the only thing we're doing this year is going to Atlantis, right? We're going to go play in that tournament. Everything else will be played at home, which does concern me when it's time to go truly on the road in Big Ten play. And with our luck, it'll be the first game of the year. We'll be on the road at Wisconsin or something stupid like that. That does worry me a little bit, but outside of that battle for Atlantis, how much will we learn? How much will we grow? South Carolina, absolutely. You better show up and be ready to play that game. But here's the good news, okay? Here's the good news. You're hopefully going to get some wins. And what that means is when you start winning games, you build confidence for yourself as an individual and as a team and as a program. That'll build confidence in you, the fan base, and guys like me that talk about us every day. Also, with individual players. Think about a guy like Mackenzie Mbako, man. He needs some of those games just to go off and tear through people and go off for 25 points against a Winthrop at home before the Big Ten schedule starts. Like, he needs stuff like that. And for all these transfers coming in, I'm looking at the starters of the guards with Miles Rice, Cannon Carlisle, your new center, and Umar Ballo. Like, that will give them an opportunity to come in and maybe not have a stress-free type of game, but have a game where they don't have to just go out and absolutely ball out. They can come in and just play basketball, especially early on in the season, work on what they want to, work with their teammates. You can, if you're Mike Woodson, you can implement some new things in your offense, new things in your defense, whatever the case may be, or just work on the things you've been teaching them all summer long. Like, that's why you schedule some of these easier games against SIU Edwardsville. Okay. That's why you put those games on the schedule. I just want us to be ready. That's my biggest thing, because as much as it was a pain to go through the non-con schedule last year because of how Indiana played and how poorly they played, I think they understood, okay, what they learned last year is we're not all that great right now. We have to show up and play our best every single day, because if you tear through your non-con schedule and you're undefeated, my worry is, and not just for Indiana, I see this across college basketball, a team will roll into their conference play thinking they're all big and bad and they're undefeated. They can't be stopped. Ain't nobody touching us. And then they just get clobbered. They get embarrassed because that other team shows up, because that other team has played some tough teams and they've taken a couple losses. Let me say that too. Losses in the non-conference schedule are not the end of the world. Can we get that out there right now? It's not the end of the world. You can lose a couple of games. It can be in the battle for Atlantis. It can be against South Carolina. Heck, if you lose to an Eastern Illinois, okay, like, maybe not them. They weren't great last year, but you get what I'm saying. That's a wake-up call. It's like, oh, crap. We've got to get our stuff together. We've got to be ready to go every single day. We got a lot of work to do before January rolls around. So you don't have to go undefeated in non-con play. Fans want to, of course, and we want us to win. There's no doubt about it. But a loss early on isn't detrimental. It's not just horrible. You learn from that. What's the famous quote, right? You learn more from a loss than you do from a win. And maybe it's a good idea for this team to lose. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe this team will just run through and be undefeated everything they do. Who knows, right? All I'm saying is, as we wrap all this up today, I'm not overly pumped about the non-conference schedule. I don't think it's difficult enough. I think there's some easy paths in there. Not really leaving Bloomington concerns me. And I was hoping for a couple of more bigger non-conference games, like a battle for Atlantis, like South Carolina. And I was just wanting a little bit more of those. But overall, it is a manageable schedule. So manageable that we're going to do an episode on this early next week about how the Hoosiers could maybe just roll right through non-conference play and get into that Big Ten schedule. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Hoosiers on YouTube, on audio. I love you either way. Thank you so much for being here. We're having a lot of fun. We are rolling right through the month of July. August will be here before you know it. College football is going to be here before you know it. We're counting down to like 50 days until the start of the Indiana football season, even sooner than that before the start of college football itself. You've got week 0 and expanded week 1. All right, we'll ramp up our coverage of the football team as we get closer to that. And then, hey, November 6th cannot get here soon enough for Indiana basketball, okay? Have the exhibition on November 1 and opening day on November 6th. So, between now and then, continuing to talk about this Indiana team, the players, and there's still recruiting things we need to go over as well. We'll have that more for you this week here on Locked On Hoosiers. Until next time, Hoosier fans, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.